This video is about the 5 greatest misconceptions of Egypt. And I'll be quoting this National Geographic article. It says displayed till 1/3/14, so it's fairly recent. I mean, National Geographic magazine article. And I'm going to go to page 30, I believe it was. Was it 30? Yes, on page 30 it says the Pyramids of Power. And when they name them, they start at Egypt's Middle Kingdom, which proves my point. Eurocentrics wanting to start where they want to start it, instead of starting with Heru and the First Dynasty. And they talk about Egypt unified in armor, Zoser, King, Third Dynasty, buried in Step Pyramid, Saqqara. They go to Khufu, etc., etc. So they touch on the Old Kingdom. But when let me show you what I mean. It says Ancient World, it says Egypt's Middle Kingdom and Egypt's New Kingdom. That's how it's listed in the content. So why did they put Egypt's Old Kingdom? Because they want you to think of it as a white man's world instead of a black man's world, which it really is. Now, if you look at to make a long story short, their explanation of, I can't show you too much because I don't want to give them an excuse to take off this video, but their explanation of why the Hyksos kings enter is because they introduced bronze into Egypt, and that the Egyptians used bronze against them. They basically oversimplified what happened. The Egyptians used Mantu arts, applied it, and used their own weapons against them. Yes, but look at where the Hyksos' capital was. It was in the Nile Delta. And even to put in that way is giving them more credit than they deserve. They barely were in Egypt, and it didn't take them very long to get kicked the hell out, compared to the rest of historical Egypt and thousands of years that it's been there. And if you look at the cataracts, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and the Nile in general, everything about Egypt, it stretches into Africa, proves my point. It doesn't stretch into the Middle East. It just included Babylon at one point. Now, so the top 5 misconceptions about Egypt. Number 1 is that ancient Egypt was white. That's a great misconception. Ancient Egypt was black. The second is that ancient Egyptians like to brag and put too much on things. And that's not the case. They invented martial arts and Mantu arts. They didn't brag for no reason. They actually invented all the arts and sciences we use today. The third greatest misconception is that the ancient Egyptians either lost or had a draw in the Battle of Kadesh when they actually won the battle. They decided to stop the battle because Mantu arts was slaughtering the Asiatic peoples. The fourth greatest misconception of ancient Egypt is that women ruled Egypt. 1 or 2 pharaohs were women. For example, Cleopatra and Hatshepsut, whatever the hell their name is. People like me who are real Egypt enthusiasts, we don't care about 1 or 2 pharaohs. We're not able to pronounce all the pharaohs' names. No one is. And the 1 or 2 that we get wrong is because, they don't matter. They don't matter. And that's all there is to it. Now, so by the time you get to the other misconceptions about Egypt, they have to do with history and war, and the last greatest misconception. If I was to chop them both up and put it one, I'd say that the knowledge of Egypt came from somewhere else. It came from Africa. To really encompass all the 5 greatest misconceptions. Thank you. There's a divine order that starts in Africa on the planet Earth, and it is most represented by the Igbo people, and I'll explain why in a minute. In ancient Egypt, which you see according to even National Geographic, it was the first empire that is recognized as such, having all the qualities of an empire, and it started about 3600 BCE, if you include the pre-dynastic pharaohs. And on this it says 2700 BCE. Now, if you look at the other empires they include, and they don't include the Indus Valley Empire because it wasn't quite like Egypt, didn't have the buildings, didn't have the same war arts. The knowledge, the war arts, the wisdom, the loyalty, the respect, the love, the life, God's truths passed from Egypt, and the people who had them migrated to Igbo, and the Egyptians were corrupted by the Babylonian horror, and then later later the Arabs would invade. Of course, those Asiatics, Persians. There was Babylonians. There was Greeks and Romans, and there was a lot of other people, Nubians, that invaded too. But this, I'm trying to do a fair summation. And so the Middle East catches the next wave of truth, and then the Indus Valley Empire, which the Egyptians who are related to them, the Dravidians and other groups that were in the area later on, they migrate to the Indus Valley, they cultivate Hinduism, and then they travel to, Asia, and some people travel to Europe, and the majority of the knowledge goes to China and Tibet in that area, and they cultivate Kung Fu and Taoism and Buddhism and things of this nature. And then, you have the Qin dynasty, the Mings, the Mongols, the Qin and Han, the Khmer Empire, the Khmer Rouge will emerge later in history, but we're not getting to that. I'll get into that in my other videos. This is the end. Then the Holy Roman Empire, you can see that Roman Empire is, when you look at the map of Rome, the most significant parts of it are by North Africa and the Middle East, not deep into Europe. And I'll get into that in other videos again. And then later on, you see the natives, and much later, made their way over there. So why, you might ask, do I say that the true descendants of the ancient Egyptians are the people who are in the Nigerian area, in Biafran area, etc., in Niger, etc., because of the DNA tracings, because of the fact that the migrations of different animals and peoples, that's where people migrated. That's why Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. And the people who were conquered by many other peoples and were mixed, just like I'm not as much of an Igbo as someone who's full of Igbo, is the same reason why someone in Egypt or Ethiopia is not as much of an Egyptian as an Igbo is, because they're mixed with other peoples for whatever reason. Thank you.